Welcome to another episode. Today we'll be talking about cataclysms again. I remember when I watched Graham Hancock's documentary, Ancient Apocalypse, on Netflix. I remember thinking, oh, wow, these things happened in the past. And, what are the chances of them happening again? And we know that Graham Hancock and Ronald Carlson, they suggest comet impact theory, and where we know that these things can happen and cause floods and volcanoes and all sorts of natural disasters all over the world. Um, but I also always wondered, is it is it going to happen again? And if it is going to happen again, how do we know when or how? Because comic impact theory, it sounds quite random, right? And then I came across another theory called ECDO, ethical skeptics hypotheses. I think it's exothermic, core-mantle, decoupling, Dzhanibekov oscillation theory. And I also had a few guests, if you have watched other episodes, going through this theory, but I just fail to understand deeply what this is about, because if you don't have that kind of scientific background, it might be difficult to grasp. And this theory is also highly technical. So today I have invited Ryan Garner. He has been researching this topic casually for a while now, and he has been helping with this theory as well. And he's very much interested in this. And I got the feeling that he really has a really good understanding of this topic and can break it down for us. So, without a further ado, I give you Ryan Garner. So, let's get started. And why don't we start with how you got into ECDO? And maybe we could also give a simple explanation what the theory is about, and then we will go into deeper into the
Yeah,
theory.
sure. So I saw it in passing on Twitter because I follow a guy named Ethical Skeptic. He's mostly for his statistician stuff because he was presenting alternate stats about COVID, and he presented his a theory there that I thought was just too far out. I thought it was implausible, and that it was like his theory is that the Earth tipped on it, like the cataclysm that Graham Hancock and Ancient Apocalypse and other people are been talking about recently and on Joe Rogan and stuff. That the actual cause of that was the Earth tipping on its side briefly, then tipping back again shortly after. And I thought, okay, that's one, that's not possible, and two, there'd be so much evidence for that we would have already discovered it by now. And that's what I was thinking. So I was like, I wanted to look into it or quickly disprove it or find a way to dismiss it. So that was my initial reaction. And first I thought, okay, well, I thought it's not plausible for the Earth to tip on its side. And when I looked into that, I found out that actually it is plausible, and that's weird. So the plausibility of it, there's a video by Veritasium called "The Bizarre Behavior of Rotating Bodies," and in that video, he explains that there's this famous mathematician named Euler, and he had this theory called the intermediate axis theorem, where if a small weight, like if there's a rotating sphere, that a small weight imbalance on that sphere can cause it to suddenly shift to a new location, or what seems sudden. What's really happening is that weight imbalance is starting to wobble more and more and more, and it builds up centrifugal force in a circle that's pushing outward, and it causes it to rotate. Um, so I was like, okay, that's plausible, sort of. And then I saw that Albert Einstein believed that this was plausible, that a small weight imbalance can cause the Earth to tip on its side rather suddenly. So, but in I was still wanting to dismiss it though at that point, because I was like, okay, maybe this is like outdated stuff, or they figured it out since then. And so I came across that Veritasium video where I said called "The Bizarre Behavior of Rotating Bodies," and in that video even they talk about the Earth tipping on its side. And he does it like a suspense thing, like, oh, like to keep you hooked and watching the video, like the Earth might tip on its side, like you should be scared or freaked out. And then at the end he's like, just kidding. Scientists determined that wasn't possible. Well, his justification for why it can't happen was two things. One is that when the Earth forms, it's like there's a bunch of like rocks and stuff spinning around, that it tends to form along a plane, and that the mass will be at the equator, and that keeps things stable. And second, even if it wasn't stable, the inside of the Earth is liquid. So like mass wants to move, it gets flung out to the equator, and things will just shift over time, and it'll always stay stable. So he was like, well, as long as those two things are true, that the masses are really one thing, that the mass is at the equator, it can't happen. Well, ECDO has an answer for that, and that is that that there's that there's a mass buildup inside the Earth called the low velocity zones, and they were discovered in the 1980s, like bigger than the moon, and they don't move, and they're of a different density, and they're at the equator. So they're like, there's this low density region that I don't know if it's growing or not. They're not, scientists aren't sure yet, but it's very gigantic, and it's less density, and it can't move to like the North Pole where, you know, it would be if to balance the Earth out. So then it's like, okay, well, now under physics and mainstream science, it's plausible. And Einstein thought it was plausible, and Euler, if you were to present it to him, would probably think it's plausible. So I was like, okay, well, I guess it is possible for the Earth to tip on its side suddenly from a relatively small amount of force with just normal physics that we already know about. It's kind of counterintuitive physics that a small force can cause a big sudden change, but that's how it works out. I went to the second, I retreated back to the next thing. I'm like, well, it's not even plausible in the first place. And I'm like, okay, well, even if it is plausible, there'd be so much evidence for it. It makes so many predictions that can't happen. And so the first prediction I thought of was, well, it predicts, if the Earth were to suddenly physically move, the water would maintain its normal momentum. So it would end up causing the water to wash over the land if the Earth were to make a quick movement like that. So ECDO predicts exactly where the oceans washed over the land on every single continent and in what direction. So I was like, well, that's a really precise, exact prediction. You even give the years that it happened. So I was thinking I should be able to disprove it or find evidence for or against it relatively easily. So I thought the first thought that came to me was that if the oceans washed over the land, that would predict exactly where the salt is, because ocean water is salty. And so if it washed over the land, it would leave the ground salted. And so I went looking for a salt map of the Earth to see if it matched. And I found a map from NASA of the saltiness of the entire Earth. And on every single continent, the salt matches exactly what ECDO predicts the oceans would wash over. And that really freaked me out because I thought right now I was just taking this silly and casually, just investigating in my spare time. And I was like, okay, it's plausible. And the first thing I researched and investigated that seemed far out, like, because what's the chance that the salt would be in the correct location on every single continent? Like, it's like if you divide it into 4, it's like 1 in 4 each time, but it's like over and over and over again. So the chance that that would match seemed pretty small, and it freaked me out a little bit. So I went looking for others, and I kept finding things like it predicts that the ocean was like the most violent ocean movement happened between Alaska and Russia, where the water like rushes northward when the Earth tips. And sure enough, there's like a plateau there where like on Google Maps that you can see where it looks like the ground's blown out. And I asked AI for some anomalies there, and it says, oh yeah, the seafloor here looks like it's tropical seafloor. What is this doing up in the North Pole? And 3 different anomalies all say the same thing. And yeah, I just kept finding stuff like that. So then that's when I got interested, and I was like, I want to understand more about it. I researched the other aspects of it, but to me, ECDO is really the theory that is a method to explain the cataclysm of ancient apocalypse with Graham Hancock on Netflix. It explains why it happens and exactly how it happened, and offers an alternate explanation. And that's the main theory to me. What's interesting though too is that it also he breaks ECDO into 3 things, and one is that the outer part of the Earth moving, because it's like solid, liquid, solid, so the outer part moves, and that's what does that. That's what's interesting to me and makes the most predictions. There's also like archaeological evidence, because humanity's been around for 300,000 years, and we've been the official story is that we've been hunter-gatherers until 6,000 years ago, which seemed implausible to me. So he offers explanations in that room. Like you can see, okay, well, the only places that would survive would be big stone places up high. And he also predicts that as the event's about to happen, that the pressure built up causes heat from the oceans, from the friction and the pressure trying to move would cause heat and global warming, and that explains part of the global warming. I don't find that stuff as interesting. Those are very narrow, and they make one specific prediction essentially, that like heat's going to come from the ocean, and the other is predicts that like ancient civilizations knew that this was coming, or like a few of them survived or something. But it's not. It's kind of nebulous and not that interesting to me. I know most people into this are into like archaeological stuff. I just find it interesting that hey, he says that the oceans washed over the land exactly 6,000 years ago and in this direction, and that's what all the flood stories from around the world are about. And that's been just kind of fun, is to casually investigate it on the side to me. But yeah, I guess that just yeah, that sums it up. I don't have a reaction to it myself, since I'm already all before I even learned about this. I was planning to move to the mountains and live off grid and stuff. I had lived off grid before, and it was a great time, and I want to do it again. So to me, it doesn't really change any plans, and I'm not sure other people should change their plans either, for this. What seems sure is that, well, what I've become more and more confident of is that yes, the cataclysm happened 6,000 years ago, just like Graham Hancock and all these alternate historians are saying now. And the ECDO theory seems to be the most likely explanation. It seems to fit a lot of things. So it seems like that did happen. Will it happen again? I don't know. The signs that it would happen, like the Earth's magnetic field getting weaker, and the Earth sudden global warming, those seem to be happening. So maybe that's a sign. But um, yeah, I don't know. What to me, I see it as a thing of the past, not a thing of the future. Although, kind of plausible that maybe it would happen again. I don't know. Like there seems to be evidence that it's a cycle. But the guy who writes ECDO, Ethical Skeptic, when this is brought up, he stresses that he's not making any predictions for the future. He's just talking about what happened 6 and 12,000 years ago, and I find that interesting, and that's what I investigate. And I don't know much more about ECDO past that, but I know a little bit when we'll go into it on the call. But yeah, that's how I got into ECDO, and I've started telling family members and other people. It's just like an interesting conversation topic. It's so much more fun to talk about to people than like, I don't know, some conspiracies or politics or whatever. It's just because it's so far out. Like it seems on its face impossible. Like it's so impossible that you shouldn't even investigate it or look at it. Like it's just too far out. It's not even worth your time kind of claim. But I like to investigate far out things that might be true. And this one just freaked me out because it gets more and more evidence for it. But yeah,
What kind of
that's
reaction do you get when you tell to your friends or family about this?
oh, uh, um, they don't. I guess it's not really much of a reaction. There's some family members that were already like, so there's a couple of family members that like are already aware of like alternate things, or like that are into like ancient apocalypse TV show, and they'll engage with it a little bit. The others just kind of like let me tell my story, and then they're like, oh well, okay, I don't, it's just an event that happened. The religious ones, like my parents are quite religious, and they'll be like, oh, see, there's proof of Noah's flood, because but every culture has a flood story about this event. So that's just one of them. So that's how usually they just listen, and they're just letting me tell them about something I find interesting, kind of like in an autistic way, I guess, and then they let it move on. A few of them will engage if they're interested in ancient stuff, and the religious types will be like, see, this is proof that civilization started 12,000 years ago and got wiped out 6,000 years ago, like the Bible says, or whatever. But those are the reactions I get. I've only told it to like several people in the family. It's just a fun topic to get together. So it's a lot better topic than politics, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I guess it's politics for some reason seems to get people be divisive, and here at least you get to, I don't know, talk about different Interesting. Miss, I think Miss has a lot hidden there, like different tales and folklore, has a lot of information that, we kind of dismiss, but there's a lot there that we can look into
You
and
said
then
NIST,
find.
like the scientific agency?
No, like folklore, myth, different
Oh,
ancient
NIST.
scriptures,
Yeah.
religious books like Bible. There seems to be a lot of interesting things that I personally always used to just dismiss. I would be like, "Oh, this is just a story, it's a fairy tale." But now I see more and more that there's some information that we can really take seriously in all these stories, ancient stories.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it answers the question, like ECDO, it provides an answer to many questions, like why have humans been around for 300,000 years, but only were official stories that they're hunter gatherers until 6,000 years ago? Well, I mean, any cataclysm could cause that, but it'd have to be a global cataclysm. And there's only really two theories that I'm aware of for that. There's Graham Hancock's theory that's supported by Randall Carlson about the comet impacts all over the Earth. And then there's ECDO is the other one. It's the other thing that could cause it, which just I can see why people would dismiss it or scientists wouldn't look into it initially because it just seems implausible at first unless you're aware of Euler's intermediate axis theorem, which talks about rotating bodies making a sudden movement from a very tiny weight imbalance. And that's just not intuitive. So it's easy to like dismiss without looking at. But once you see it, then it's like, okay, well, we're a solid floating on a liquid and there's a weight imbalance and we found it. So, I mean, that you can't rule that out at this point. Like once it's physically possible, and that there's evidence that there is the weight imbalance that's required. All you got to move on to, okay, well, what does evidence say? And every time I look at studies, it could just be unrelated studies. There's a surprising number of studies that have stuff related to this. The scientist isn't going to say that the Earth outright flooded, but they'll be like, oh my God, the water level suddenly rose 6,000 years ago more than is possible to explain from all the ice caps melting. How is that possible? And they'll just like have a little note in their science paper, and then they'll be like, "This, I warn, people should be warned of the implications of this," and then they move on. But like, no one really notices. No one's really put all of that together, except until Ethical Skeptic did.
So why do you think Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson's? I mean, the difference is that he's saying that it's cosmic impact because of magnetic fields. I guess it's weaker now, and we will be drawing more and more um, asteroids from the space, and so that would explain the flood. And it pretty much can be cataclysmic as well if we get impact. I think he talks about the one that recently in 2000, I think 3, in happened in North Russia. Um, there was an impact, and he says that is something like that entered the ocean and not the Earth, that it could have caused something like that again. Um, but what?
Yeah, I mean that's plausible to me too. The impact theory. It's called the Younger Dryas impact theory, and that's plausible to me too. But I see more and more evidence that ECDO is a better theory to explain the cataclysm than the impact theory.
Why? Is there like anything that specific?
Um, the stories line up more. Is one like it's just on every single front. It's like a little bit more supported. They both got good evidence, but like um, the stories talk about flooding and volcanoes and earthquakes, which are things that would happen as part of ECDO. And there's also even a couple stories that there's a story in I think China and Egypt, and in both of the stories they talk about the sun setting in a new location, and the location they describe matches ECDO. So that's not something that happens from comets. Um,
Yeah, that's one
yes,
thing. Yeah.
and the stories, like what there would be universal stories about the sky raining down, and that's not there, and it doesn't. The volcanoes I don't know, like if this were to like be debated with Randall Carlson, like basically, I think I've heard him try to explain that like, oh, it somehow set off the volcanoes, the impacts did from like the shocks or something. But I see the volcanoes and earthquakes are much more correlated with like the crusts moving around than they are with like a comet's hitting.
Yeah, I think
So
the problem with impact theory is it's kind of like random, so that the it impacts random parts of the world. Um, so it's maybe difficult to explain the pattern because you don't know where it's gonna end up, and then you're like, I think it's ECDO brings more structure. There's more like you can follow up, whereas impact theory you don't know. It's chaotic. So then, yeah, with
well,
the
a big
salt.
thing that would go against impact theory is that like this is the all of the evidence is like almost equally spread around the whole Earth. So it's like it should be extra strong where the impact happened. And so his answer to that is that oh, it broke up into a bunch of pieces and like the whole Earth got coated from all directions simultaneously. And that seems a lot less plausible. I understand that like a broken up asteroid kind of travels like a cluster, like a shotgun blast or something, and okay, I can't like rule it out. It's just it seems weaker. I think I've heard Randall Carlson say that his main in one of his interviews he said that the reason he believes the impact theory is that there's nano diamonds everywhere. I don't really know what those are, and I haven't looked into that yet. But basically, it's like it's carbon that's under really high pressure forms like dust, diamond dust, and that can happen from an impact. I don't know if it can happen from ECDO. So the diamond dust or whatever he's talking about, the nano diamonds might actually be evidence in favor of the impact theory over ECDO, or maybe ECDO's the shock waves from the water or something is enough to like compress the air enough to like cause I don't know, maybe it's possible through that. I haven't looked into that yet, but those are the two leading theories and I find them both plausible. It's just ECDO is growing on me. Like it
Mhm.
matches the flood stories, and there's not many stories of comets raining down. There's not like not like every single culture has a story about when the sky rained, but they do have a story like it fell from all directions, but they do have a story about floods, and the floods are often accompanied with earthquakes and volcanoes, which so the stories seem to match more.
Hmm.
um, there's archaeological evidence too, and then the fact that ECDO is plausible, and I don't think it was known to be plausible when impact theory was proposed, and maybe they would support it. I think I think eventually somebody is going to present ECDO theory and intelligently argue with Randall Carlson or Graham Hancock about it, and I think they'll come around or open up to it a lot more. I think they're just not aware of the evidence in favor of it that much. And I think they've heard. I think what's happened is they've heard some different theory about the Earth tipping or something, or the crust suddenly moving that isn't ECDO and that was disproven or has too much contradictory stuff. And so they've just dismissed that whole category. So if someone brings it up, they're already like, "Oh, I've already looked into that. That's no."
Yeah.
But like no, this is a different way of looking at it. This is a different part of the earth that's moving, and there's a lot more evidence for it now that's been discovered, and you need to take a fresh look at it, and someone needs to bring that to them and present it to them, and I hope someone does. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the 90-degree tilt to from north to west? I think that's the classic one. And Chan Thomas's, I think he also talks about that one.
Yeah, Ben Davison, I think too, the space weather guy, talks about 90 degrees. He's not really sure about which the angle is. What they say is that there's the weight of the ice at the poles that wants to be at the equator, and that's causing centrifugal force. I've got hold on, just um, I actually got the book here. This is the book with the forward from Einstein,
Ah, oh,
and
good.
yeah, I bought it. I guess I was watching an interview with Graham Hancock, and someone brought up the Earth's crust moving, and he like briefly commented on it and suggested reading that book. So I got that book, and I didn't know Albert Einstein had written the forward to it, but that book covers the ice cap alone being enough weight to cause the Earth. And they contacted like leading geologists and people experts around the world back when this wasn't taboo, and they did the math on it and found that the ice cap isn't enough to make the entire Earth tip, but it is enough to make like the outer crust, the outer part shift on the liquid. And so that math and all that evidence for it is in that book. And the place that the ice cap wants to go to is the equator. So that would explain the 90-degree shift, since the ice cap's really close to the pole, then it goes to the equator. But the things discovered in the 1980s, those low density, low velocity zones that are the size of the moon, underneath, like kind of near the equator, those want to move to the poles, and those are offset at 104 degrees, not 90. And also, if you just look at a general map of the dense, what is it, like a gravity map of the Earth, like basically like the density of the Earth, which you can add an image for that, but it's 104 degrees. So both the overall density of the Earth and the low velocity zones, they're both 104 degrees, not 90. So I think that's why I would lean towards 104 instead of 90. Plus, the 104 degrees is also, that's what's used across ECDO. That's what's used to like predict the direction that the oceans are going to come from, on each continent. And 104 degrees is found on many ancient things. It's found on the angle inside the Great Pyramid. It's found on other artifacts like the Nubian egg, and I think, and the Nazca lines. Like there's, and that would make sense. Like if the North Pole had moved to a new location for one lifetime and then moved back, then it would be something that would be immortalized, or what's the right word, immortalized in carvings or in great hieroglyphics or something like, I don't know, like geoglyphs in the ground and stuff like that. So it makes sense that it would get recorded, although in a primitive way, because society probably just got destroyed.
So it just seems like 104, because it's like 90. You're like, okay, 90, but 104 is so specific. It's not 105. It's not 103.
Actually, well, it's not exactly 100. I think he's like settled on 104. Like there's some stuff that says 108. There's some stuff that like it's plus or minus like a few degrees, I think, is the real thing. But the Egyptians were very precise. And if the Great Giza Pyramid is actually part of ECDO and it was built by people who knew it was coming, that angle is exactly 104, I believe. And that would justify that angle being the precise angle as opposed to approximately 104, because like the 104 degrees is almost like eyeballing the density maps and the low velocity zone maps, and it's not exact as it is. But it's just like it's kind of like there's a bunch of different things that all are around 104 degrees, and it's just like I think that's what the author has settled on. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. What we need to do is I just need to introduce the theory. I have a thread that I wrote for how that it kind of introduces this concept. I start off by suggesting that people watch a video by Veritasium, which is a very popular mainstream science educator. He explains how rotating bodies have unusual behavior, and he starts off with showing what astronauts discovered in space, where if they spin a wing nut, it'll be spinning one way and then it'll suddenly flip around and spin the other way, and then it'll spin back again. And the amount of weight imbalance determines that frequency and how long it will spend in each position. And one of the bases of ECDO is that the Earth, part of the Earth, is subject to that, like not the core, but the outer parts. So in the video, he talks, as part of the keeping the excitement up, he says, oh, the Earth might tip on its side throughout the whole video. And then at the end, he says, well, scientists agree that that won't happen because Earth's mass is distributed around the equator. And as long as the heavy part of the Earth is around the equator, it can't do that. And then he ends the video. So I think that's the important first thing to look at, But as long as you understand the concept that rotating bodies behave weird because of a weight imbalance on one side can slowly build up centrifugal force until it flips it around, that establishes that concept, which isn't intuitive to a lot of people, that when things are spinning in space, they can have a weight imbalance that like it's a wobble that like builds up. Like if there's a weight on this, like originally, like for Albert Einstein, he thought that the cause of the Earth tipping on its side would be ice not being centered on the north and south pole. So if there's a weight that's off center and the Earth is spinning, like the force of that, like just continually is pushing sideways, trying to bring the ice caps to the pole, and the friction in the between the crust and the mantle is causing friction there that prevents that from happening, but it wants to happen. And the bizarre behavior of rotating body kind of covers why it wants to happen and why a small force can cause a really big movement, which is counterintuitive. So it's important to understand that a small weight imbalance will eventually build up enough force over time to like cause a huge shift. And that's an understood part of physics. It was discovered by Euler, and it's called like Euler's intermediate axis theorem. And that's what he covers there. There's like three axes, and he explains Euler's axis theorem. So as I said, though, at the end of that video, he says that Earth's weight is balanced. He also has the GIF from the video here, which is the next tweet here. He shows that you can put a ball of clay around with a weight imbalance on one end, like so that in this GIF here, with the clay ball, that wing nut there represents like ice on the poles. And if it's not perfectly centered, even though it looks quite centered there, even if it's not perfectly centered, eventually the centrifugal force will build up and cause the ball to switch directions. And it's a similar force that ECDO proposes happens to the Earth on rare occasion. Mm-hmm. So he says that the weight balance is stable. So in the next tweet, he says that there's two justifications for Earth having a stable rotation axis. One is that when the planet formed, like most of the mass, because it's being spun around like this, it forms at the equator. So the heavy stuff's probably at the equator, is what the scientists said. And then the second is that even if it isn't there, that it'll like migrate there because the inside of the Earth is kind of liquid. And this GIF right after just it's not specifically related, but it shows inside of the Earth moving and how it's liquid. So the mainstream explanation for why ECDO can't happen is that when the Earth formed, its mass is at the equator, and that even if it wasn't, it would shift to the equator. But that leaves a very narrow way for it to happen. There would have to be a buildup of a low or high density area that's not able to migrate, that doesn't move. So in the next thing here, in the 1980s, exactly that was discovered. They call them low velocity provinces. So they're called low velocity provinces because they don't move like the others, and their density is very different, and they're not centered. So they're not sure if they're growing. I tried to like look into these. They're still like learning about them. It's hard to like image them exactly and get them with seismological data. But what we do know is, and this is again part of mainstream science, is that there's these two gigantic regions. They're like twice the size of the moon, or the size of the moon. I think I heard twice the size of the moon inside the Earth, and they're of a different density, and they don't move. So the mainstream explanation for why ECDO can't happen demands that there be a large area that is a different density and can't move. That's the only way the Earth can tip on their side, according to mainstream science. And then mainstream science also discovered exactly that in the 1980s. So this is another picture of those low velocity provinces that was developed later after the 1980s. That earlier one is from the 1980s. We've got higher resolution images of it now. And they line up with ECDO, which proposes 104-degree rotation is what wants to happen. And those are those zones there that don't move, and they cause a weight imbalance on the Earth. So let me get to, I think I'm ready to move to the next one. So the next one, it shows Earth's 3 moments of inertia. So it basically, this is like an exaggerated map of the gravity of Earth. Again, this is mainstream accepted science. They've just amplified it so you can visually see it. The reason the ECDO author, Ethical Skeptic, includes these images, or especially, is because they contain a 104-degree angle. And so you find this angle across ECDO, across multiple things. And so it shows that his angle is correct, or at least it supports his theory that the angle that the rotation happens is at 104 degrees. So these are just different ways of representing the same thing. This gravity, it also implies that this gravity imbalance you see here, or weight imbalance, is due to the low velocity provinces. Most of what's interesting about ECDO to me is it predicts exactly where the oceans washed over the land and in what direction. There's so many predictions that can be made from that, and that's what's fun to research for me. I do have a kind of it's not a very good understanding, but a basic understanding of like his justification for why it happens, and that's what this thread is about. The next one is just the standard the ECDO animation that's popular and included on most of the posts. It shows the ECDO. I'm sorry, it shows the low velocity provinces there in darker gray, and they want to move to the poles, and that's what state 2 is them moving to the poles.
So right now we are in state 2, or we are right now state 1?
We're in state 1 currently.
We're in state 1. Okay, the original version is state 1, and then temporary is state 2.
Yeah, so in state 1, we have an ice cap that is off center and heavy, and it wants to move to the equator. And we also have low density zones that are slow moving near the equator. So both of those want to move. The low velocity zones, the dark gray stuff here, wants to move to the poles, and the heavy stuff wants to move to the equator. That's what happens when you spin something. Like the heavy
Yeah,
part wants to go out to where you're spinning it.
right.
So this is the basis of why it's possible for the Earth to tip on its side. And it seems pretty just implausible just because it's such a big event. Like there's so much mass that's moving, and there's not that much force involved. But as I said, Einstein supports that this is plausible, and it's also Euler. If this was presented to the famous mathematician Euler, he's the one who came up with the idea that that a small weight imbalance eventually leads to a dramatic sudden change out of nowhere, and
Mm.
that's so it's the plausibility of it is supported by famous mathematicians and Einstein, and but it requires a weight imbalance that can't move. And those weight imbalances are the ice cap, which Einstein was aware of, and these low velocity zones, which were only discovered in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. But these low
Um,
velocity zones are underground?
yes, like you can see them as the dark, almost black, dark gray Minecraft looking cubes underneath
Yeah.
on this image here. So they take up a huge area. Like basically the magma there has stopped moving. Like it's just
Oh,
sitting still, or affected almost sitting still. And that's why they're called low velocity zones.
uh-huh.
And they're low density.
Okay.
So yeah, but basically that gives the requirements. So we have the scientific basis for it, which is the Euler's intermediate axis theorem, that a small mass imbalance can cause a sudden change out of nowhere eventually, and it builds up to that over time. And the weight imbalance itself has been discovered. The ice cap was obviously known about, but and that was first investigated in the 1950s with Albert Einstein and someone else, and or Charles Hapgood. And the low velocity zones were discovered in 1980, and that adds to the weight imbalance.
Mm. Okay. So
Um,
the
Yeah, see what the next one here. ECDO also proposes that the Earth's magnetic field stops this from happening. This part I don't understand very much. I think he says that the way that the liquid behaves, that is like, because Earth is like a solid floating on a liquid with a solid again in the middle, and so there's a liquid in between two solids, and the way that liquid is like how it flows or moves is based on Earth's magnetic field because it's made out of iron. I don't understand that very much, but he proposes that the tipping to the side happens when the magnetic field goes down, or maybe it causes the magnetic field to go down. I don't really understand that part, but the magnetic field is going down, or and is in the process of doing so, or at least it seems like it, and it's doing it faster and faster. So that's what this next GIF is. I don't find it that relevant. This map here is the strength of the magnetic field, and there's like a weak zone that's forming in South America.
Yeah,
For
and it's
that weak
getting
zone,
bigger, actually.
what?
It's getting bigger, and it's moving and getting bigger in size.
Yeah, and if you notice, just in general, the field everywhere is kind of getting weaker. I think it's lost like 30% of its strength over like some hundreds of years very recently, and it's like
Mm,
a, it's like a curve going down faster and faster,
mm,
with Earth's magnetic field going down. And as we'll get to, I think
mhm.
I feel like that's more concerning than ECDO is. But yeah, we'll get into that. But yeah, that zone that's forming over South America, satellites have to change their orbit because they get radiation too much. The radiation becomes too strong over South America when they fly over. So it's starting to get to the point where it causes problems. The field is so weak.
Mhm.
Um, So the, the next one is a map made by Craig Stone. He's someone who investigates ECDO. He's as I said, it predicts exactly where the oceans moved over the land, which was because and at what speed. And this map kind of shows that.
Which
I
one?
can't verify this map. I don't know the values there. It seems just
Which
like
one?
the general.
This one on screen?
It's
This
the one with the blue in the center and the red around the outside.
okay, this one.
Yeah, so that's showing that the velocity of when the Earth tips, like the velocity change of different locations. I can't really verify that, but that's part of what's proposed will happen there. Um, there's like an eye of the storm basically. There's 2 points where that don't really have movement, and that's like the pivot points of it tipping on its side. And one's in South America, and the one is north of Australia, and that's what those centers are.
Mhm.
Um, the next one is I'll just point out that when this happens, the proposed velocities of water and the movement is really violent, and so the only places that of humanity that would survive that are places on top of mountains and stuff, and made out of big heavy stones. And so there's sites around the world that are of big heavy stones on top of mountains, and that's generally where we find them. ECDO, the next one, I point out that ECDO is kind of hard to research as far as looking at ice cores and other things because it spends very little time in the other position, or at least that's what Ethical Skeptic proposes. He says it flips on its side for like around a human lifetime and then flips back again. At least that's what he proposes. Again, I can't verify that. I don't know how it works. I don't know if it's going to happen again, but that's that's what he proposes. So I was just introducing his theory. Um, there's multiple things that support ECDO, like the biodiversity. It predicts that away from the eyes of the storm, there won't be much diversity of life because it keeps getting wiped out, and that seems to kind of be reflected in this picture here. And the exception you'll see is in Africa. There's some red there. There's some biodiversity there, although Ethical Skeptic would probably defend that biodiversity by pointing out that the ocean comes from the north under his theory, and it can't wash over all of Africa. So like the Sahara Desert. He predicts that the Sahara Desert was caused by ECDO. And indeed, the Sahara Desert is under mainstream science accepted to be green right before the cataclysm that happened.
So
There's
how does ECD how did this desert how did it what's the explanation?
So under ECDO, the Africa moves northward to the North Pole or closer to the North Pole. And when it does so, the Mediterranean Sea would wash over Africa if that were to happen.
Yeah.
And so he proposes that, this is again a mainstream science thing, that the Sahara Desert was changed from green to desert rather suddenly at a cataclysmic event. And he says that this is the cataclysmic event did cause that. It wasn't just some other climate change or something like that caused the Sahara to be desert. And basically it salts the ground, right? Because you got ocean water washing over the land. It salts the soil, and crops from growing. So it just turned the whole region into a desert. At least that's his proposal.
Okay, but doesn't it mean that, well, if it always shifts in the same way, right? 104, stage 1, stage 2, 6,000 years and so on, but about right now, we were supposed to have tropical area there then.
Well, it doesn't. The area doesn't flip back and forth. Rather, like, if I'm not sure if this event happens in the exact same 104 degrees each time, and I'm not even sure ethical skeptic would defend that idea. I think he proposes that it happened this way last time, but given that the cause of it is the low velocity zones, those low velocity zones probably stay in a similar location. We don't know enough about them to be sure, but I doubt like they just move to a different place and cause a different kind of rotation. So it makes sense to me that when a rotation like this happens, it would happen in the same way each time, but I don't really actually know that. What I see here is that he predicts that the last time it happened, it went like this. And that's what I see evidence for when I research it.
Okay.
So, like basically each time it happens, supposedly the Sahara gets washed over with water, and it just keeps the ground salted and it keeps it deserty. So I don't know how it turned green again. I'm not sure. Yeah, that doesn't match up to me. As I said, I don't understand his theory very well. I'm not a very good person to explain it, but I have a general idea of it. So I'll explain in a little bit why it's interesting to me. There's only a little, the parts that I do know about it and find interesting are what I researched. Like basically it makes a lot of predictions, and I would go and research those predictions and find out that scientists are like, hey, how the hell is this happening? And ECDO provides an explanation, which that keeps happening. So that's what kind of freaked me out and got me interested, because it seemed, when I first saw this, it seemed too far out to be real. I thought like it could be easily debunked because it makes such grand predictions. Because if this happened, there would be animals that suddenly froze to death out of the blue while they were in a normal green area. Well, that is what happened. There's mammoths that were discovered that were just suddenly flash frozen while they were busy eating flowers, which shouldn't be possible. It predicts that biodiversity will be very small everywhere away from those axis points. And yep, that's what happens when you look at the map, except for Africa. But there's an explanation for that, I guess, because the water, there's not enough water coming from the north because it's just the Mediterranean. Yeah, it makes multiple predictions. Another one, I guess, if we can skip over to it, since I'm covering some of the predictions it makes. If we can go to the picture of between Alaska and Russia. When I first saw this as a kid, I was like, it kind of looked like the ocean was blown out northward here. And I've always wanted to like look into it. And now with ECDO predicts that the ocean, of all the places on the earth where the ocean would move the most, it would be between Alaska and Russia, and it would be going northward. And sure enough, there's a big region there that looks like it's blown out. And when I go and look into what's on the seafloor there, If I asked the AI if there's any anomalies on the seafloor there, I didn't tell it any leading questions. That's how I started the chat, and it listed 3 anomalies, and all 3 anomalies were essentially the scientists asking, "What is seafloor from tropical seafloor from Hawaii doing way up in Alaska?" Which also freaked me out because like every time I try to find I keep finding like new things. Like I'll be falling asleep and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, what about that? What about that thing that looks blown out between Alaska and Russia?" Um, I wonder if there's any anomalies there, and that might support or reject ECDO, and it supports it. And I keep finding stuff that supports it.
But
The first, go ahead.
what does it say? What does AI say?
I forget the specifics of it. There's like they would go in. I remember that they went down to the seafloor there and they drilled and they found like the composition of the seafloor there. It's like in layers, and when they look at the layers, they see tropical layers, and they see it for different reasons. Like I forget the things. Like they were sampling like this one chemical isotope ratio or something, and that's only found at the equator, and yet it's up here at the pole. I forget which they are, but like there's 3 different things that they could measure about that area, and they all showed that it was blown out northward. I don't have the stuff for it prepared. I just found it interesting that the AI presented 3 studies, and they all had the same anomaly, which is how is tropical seafloor up here. So yeah, so that's what's interesting about ECDO to me is it makes a bunch of predictions like that. It predicts that the seafloor will be blown out up there, and it predicts that salt around the world is going to be in very specific locations. I'd like to get into that. Let's just get into what's interesting about ECDO to me. I don't understand the mechanisms of it very much. To sum up the mechanisms though, um, there's a weight imbalance of the Earth, and it's possible under physics for a small weight imbalance to eventually lead to a sudden shift. And it's possible that that sudden shift like very quickly moves right back to where it was. And that's what ECDO proposes, and it finds that there's the weight imbalances that are required are there. That's not very interesting to me. What's interesting to me is that it predicts that the oceans washed over the lands at very specific locations in very specific directions. And you there's lots of ways to test that theory. And so I like what's fun to me is to think of ways to test that the ocean washed over the land. So the very first one that I looked at, because I thought, okay, well, that's ridiculous. If the ocean's washed over the land in very specific locations, then in every single one of those, the ground would be salted. And so I went and found a salt map of the Earth, and I have my ultimate ECDO map I made here, and it includes the salt map. And so that's what these red regions are here. So ECDO proposes that, like in Africa, for example, the ocean washes southward. Sure enough, the ground is, oh no, I accidentally scrolled. Sure enough, the ground is salted there. It proposes that in North America, it comes in over the San Francisco, California area and washes eastward. And yep, that's what the salt on the ground shows. And on the other side, it's green because the ocean doesn't go there. In South America, the only place that the ocean would wash over is kind of like on the bottom right, on the right side. And yep, it's a little bit salty there. Australia, same thing. The salt is on the exact side predicted by ECDO. It's on the west side where the water would have come from. Parts that the salt, China, the water would be rushing westward over China, and that's what we see there too, red coming in the pattern there. The exceptions to this, there's 2 exceptions there. Those are those B arrows. One is in South Africa and one is in the Middle East. And the B that's proposed by Ethical Skeptic, the author of ECDO. He says that there's like a backwash. Basically, that water would get sucked out of the Gulf or the Middle East area and then wash back in. And that's a really flat land, like low sea level. And so it would just wash over the land there. And he proposes that that's why the Middle East is salty and deserty is because of the oceans washing over there.
Mm.
Yeah, so just every continent, it seems to match up. There's some places where we don't have data, but that would be another way to continue to investigate. Like if I wanted to continue looking for salt, I would try to find, like, for example, let me find a good spot. Um, like in Eastern Canada, we don't have any salty soil data, or at least it's not part of this. The salt data map comes from NASA that I got, with the green and red colors, but it's missing data for Northeast Canada. So ECDO would predict that that ground is salty there. So we could you could go look up a study, try to see if how salty the ground is there. I don't know. Maybe it's too much snow or no one's looked there, and that's why it's missing. But that's so the salt prediction, this salt map matching almost exactly, and it matches even more once you consider the mountains, which are white, which kind of deflect the water some and prevent it from washing over. So it matches even more closely when you consider the mountains. So that salt map is what initially got me interested in ECDO. Ethical Skeptic had not seen this. No one involved in researching ECDO who was aware that the salt map matched perfectly. And I thought of it and found it, and I was like, holy crap, it matches perfectly. I posted it, and Ethical Skeptic added it to his like official write up that he has that's really technical.
So
Um,
the Russia, so the
interested in
parts of
ECDO.
Russia, sorry, parts of Russia have no salt data, right? Russia and Canada have no salt data.
Yes. So if we were to find salt data, it would predict that, like, where those big areas up in Russia coming down from the north, that ground should be salty there,
Okay.
according to ECDO. So
Mm.
like if you go and research that the ground there, let's say there's some data that NASA didn't include, and you go find out that northern Russia does not have salty soil, that would be evidence against ECDO. And if it
Yeah.
did, if the soil was salty there, then it would be evidence in favor of ECDO.
And what's that white? So 2,200 feet, 607. What is that? The second white.
So all the white specks, those are like mountains, like basically where the elevation is greater than 2,200 feet or 670 meters. It's a helpful visual aid for imagining the oceans washing over, because really tall land masses would kind of redirect the water.
Mhm.
And if you look, it takes a long time. Like I inspected each of these locations closely, and the mountains do appear to add to the evidence there.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
And
another thing that doesn't seem to match ECDO here is Europe. Like it's really green, even though the water should have been coming in from up north. I think what happened there, maybe either that's evidence against ECDO, or like the Nordic area north of Europe. There's a big mountain range there, and the water's trying to come from the north. So maybe it redirects it down to away from to protect part of Europe, and that's why only what was it, Spain got hit by it. And so you see Spain is salted, but the rest of Europe's fine. So I think that might be why, but or it could be evidence against ECDO. But this salt map matched really closely, and that this salt map is the reason that I initially got interested in ECDO, because it freaked me out that it matched perfectly and no one was aware of it at the time.
yeah. And what's the coal black dots?
So I was trying. This map is really like I tried to make like an ultimate ECDO map, because you can't really find evidence for ECDO in like soil samples and ice, since it happened so briefly. It's too thin of a sliver on the ice core or the ground layers. So the only way the predictions are kind of restricted to like maps, and maybe boulders moved and maybe animals frozen. But I like the map aspect because it's fun to think about. So this combines all of the stuff that people theorize might be related to ECDO, and coal is one of them. So coal is made up of dead plants, animals. If the ocean's washed over the land, if you ever seen like water entering a place where it doesn't normally go, like the front of the water has all kinds of debris and
Yeah.
sticks and twigs and stuff being pushed along by the water as it flows. And when the water comes to a stop, it leaves all those sticks and leaves right where the highest level that the water went to. So, and and if you give it some thousands of years, that can get compacted into the coal, maybe. I don't think coal is officially part of ECDO theory. I don't. Maybe there's not enough to support it, but I put it in there because it seems to kind of match. Like if you take the time at each location, imagine where like the water was flowing over land and where you just try to guess with your mind where it might come to a stop. The coal seems to match. Like it get like in Russia, for example, the water comes northward and gets trapped between those mountains there. Um, in um, in North America, like it flows over the mountains, leaves behind the salt water gets stuck in Arizona area, salting the land and turning it to desert. But the front of the water, where all the plant matter got pushed to, there's a bunch of coal. So the coal kind of matches. So I included it. Like it matches in Australia too. Like you see the ground in Australia got salted, and then just past where the salt ends, there's a bunch of coal. So maybe coal is caused by ECDO also. That's not officially part of the theory. I just put it on this map to consider it.
Mm. So how about the northern part of South America? Why is it so um why is it like light green?
Okay, so the light green is like uh, it's extra light green because there's like the map is layered. So it's green initially because the ground is not salted there. It's green, it's extra green again because of high biodiversity. That's another layer of the map, which like highlights everything in like a light blue, just a really almost white color, like a light green color. And then the area is very high elevation, so there's lots of mountains there too. So it makes South America. I almost have too many layers to the map, but if you add up all three of those, it makes South America look really bright green. But that's because South America is the eye of the storm of the ECDO theory. Like that's like the safest place on Earth basically during ECDO. Like it's up high. There's very little. There's no oceans washing over land. The ground's as evidenced by the ground not being salted, as evidenced by being close to the rotation axis, and also high altitude.
Right. And similar situation is happening with Indonesia, right? On the right, you have
Yeah,
similar.
Indonesia is high altitude, high biodiversity. It is surrounded by water, so but the water is moving under ECDO theory. The water moves very slow there. It's kind of faint in this map, but there's a little plus in Indonesia area. That's the other rotation center point, the
So
rotation axis.
interesting. So if it's like these points, water is gonna go slower, which will spare from like massive inundation. But the middle will have sort of very strong movement of water, which will so then the effects of it will be immense. So it will
Yeah.
be cataclysmic in the middle, but on the sides, it's just will be more or less survivable.
Yeah, so I'll go over what ECDO predicts happen to the world like 6,000 and 12,000 years ago from this map. So let's start in South America. We have like a plus there. ECDO proposes that that's the Euler rotation axis. That's basically the point that it pivots briefly on in order to move to the different orientation to like allow the North Pole to move. So around this plus right here, the Earth turns counterclockwise, causing the oceans to move clockwise because the oceans like want to stay where they are. So if you basically like the right side of South America suddenly moves northward, but it does so gently because it's close to the pivot point. So and you see a little bit of salted ground over there, matching ECDO. And then on the left side, the water is going north because California moves closer to the equator. And when it moves closer to the equator, the Pacific Ocean would wash over, or if California were to suddenly move close to the equator over the course of a day or two, which like ECDO proposes, water would wash over California. And that's what that is. And the further you get away from that little plus there, the harder the water hits, the
Mm.
faster it's moving. And Alaska, and the place where the water is moving the most is up in Alaska and Russia area. Yeah. Oh, and Africa. So Africa is between the two center points, and so the water is going to very violently go or very quickly go south in Africa.
I just don't get it. How come it just seems the Mediterranean Sea is relatively smaller than all of the ocean that will be moving around, and how come the Mediterranean Sea seems to make the most impact than the oceans?
Yeah, I see that too. I think it's partly because it's very flat there. Like it's all like I only have like the mountains showing, but like Africa is like a northern Africa is like a low flat area, and the water is able to like travel further, but also it's because Africa moves the biggest distance, so the water is being pushed southward for at a higher speed for a longer time there. Well, I guess it's all the same amount of time, but the water is being pushed at a higher speed there southward, so it's able to go further.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's not. I don't know. It seems to match fine to me. What seems unusual, I guess, if you're looking for stuff where it doesn't quite match, I guess Australia kind of. Maybe Australia is just really low elevation and flat. I'd have to look again, but the water there went pretty far across, or the ground got salted pretty far into Australia before it stopped, and even though it's really close to the pivot point. But there's also a lot of water behind that arrow, so maybe that helps. I know there's not that much water in the Mediterranean, or there probably isn't. So it is kind of surprising how far it went in Africa, but then again, it moved further. Nonetheless, what is surprising about this is the side of each continent. So what made the salt map interesting to me and what got me a little freaked out about ECDO, I was like, holy crap, this actually predicted where all the salt is on Earth, is because it says on every single continent, the water is going to come from a specific direction and the ground will be salted as a result. And that's what I see on every continent. So how far it went, I guess we can debate. Maybe it doesn't match or does match, but the fact that it's on the correct side of the continent as predicted by ECDO was what got me into investigating it. Because once I saw that, I wanted to like try to find some more things.
Mhm. Okay. So, what else? I mean, I know that you said you are not interested in the archaeological, the ancient structures. But that was to me, that's the most fascinating part, like how it incorporates all these the pyramids of Giza, for example. And so how do you can you talk a little bit about that as well? How it
Yeah, as I said, like I'm not an expert in any of this, so it's hard for me to judge any of it. But I'm even less so on archaeological stuff. That said, the archaeological evidence is kind of interesting to me. It's just fun to like look at. The strongest evidence he has archaeological wise probably is the pyramid of Giza, and the fact that the water like it looks like it's been eroded by the ocean level rising, and you can there's like parabolic curves on the side of the that pyramid, where in the way that water would splash, which kind of seems, I don't know. Like the official story is that like the higher quality stones were like looted off the outside, I believe, and I guess they climbed up further along the corner edges to like loot stones than they did up the flat sides. So I guess that's possible. I don't think that's that strong of evidence. I know ECDO or Ethical Skeptic says that it's like really strong evidence and you have to explain it. So, but I don't know, maybe it is. I don't really understand like erosion of rocks over time and stuff like that. So, what's interesting to me about the Pyramid of Giza, as far as supporting ECDO, is that it's the place that indicates that humanity knew that this event was coming on the 6,000 year mark, on the 6,000 year cataclysm. So maybe it happened like 12. So ECDO proposes the cataclysm happened 12,000 and 6,000 years ago, and mainstream science accepts that there was a cataclysm at both of those times, sort of. They're coming around to the ancient cataclysm, as you might see with that Netflix series. But supposedly there's a lot of evidence that there's a cataclysm at both of those times. And under ECDO theory, maybe that the people were ready the second time around. Like the people had kept records and remembered that it had happened, 12,000 years ago. So 6,000 years after that, they were prepared. And ECDO proposes that the I feel like it shouldn't even be part of ECDO theory, because ECDO is about exothermic core decoupling, and this is about a theory about the Pyramid of Giza. It just relates to it. So, ethical skeptic proposes that the people who built the pyramids built it because they knew it was coming, and this was a monitoring station for it happening again, which is pretty wild. But it doesn't take that advanced of technology. Like the only we say ancient advanced civilizations. As far as I know, all I can see is that they were good at building and moving big stone blocks, and they were really good at astrology or astronomy, and watching the stars and aligning buildings. That's not that impressive. And then I guess they got set back to the Stone Age from that technological level. So in the pyramids, though, there's these two, what officially is called air shafts, but at the end of each of them is a map of the night sky centered on like the North Pole. And they point at the two North Pole locations as proposed by ECDO, like exactly. And the star map at the end of the tunnel is the stars that would be in position once the Earth tipped on its side. So it's like, and they're not even stars that are visible from Egypt. So there's these. So one of the stars. Sorry, I'm doing a bad job explaining the star shafts. There's these two air shafts. They're at a 104-degree angle, just like ECDO predicts the Earth is, and that's the angle we continue finding everywhere. One of the star shafts points at the current North Pole, or a little bit off from current because it moves around a bit, and it was built a long time ago. And the other one, and it has a star map at the end of the tunnel. So you can basically look up the tunnel, and you can align it with the North Star and see how the Earth is moving. It allows you to make really precise measurements about how the Earth is wobbling. And the other shaft, which is 104 degrees off of it, points at a different North Pole, and it has a map of the stars as they would be under ECDO if the Earth was tipped on its side. And that's kind of freaky. I feel like that's pretty strong evidence. I think that's stronger evidence than the erosion patterns on the outside of the pyramid. But
Can you explain a bit more? So the how do we call it, the right side? Like there are two shafts. The one that is directed at the current North Star, Polaris, I think it's called.
yeah,
Is it the right hand side? How do we what do we call them? Northern shaft?
I guess I'm not sure.
Oh, let's call
I don't
state
have
one.
memorized the directions they point, other than knowing that one points to. I mean, unless ethical
Current.
skeptic got it wrong, I think he got it right. I mean, I don't think that's something that he's able to look up and verify. So one points to current North Pole minus 6,000 years ago, or the North Pole where it was 6,000 years ago, and the other points to the ECDO temporary North Pole.
Okay.
Yeah.
So state one is current, and we can see the uh the current North Star if we look at this current the shaft. But the second one, so okay, so we rotate the Earth 104 degrees, right?
Yes.
And then that shaft is directed at the North
Polaris.
Pole of state two.
Yes. So because when the Earth tips on, when the Earth so Giza's like here on the side of the Earth, and so when the Earth tips, to look at the North Pole is a different angle, and the two angles, the angle that's proposed of the shift is 104 degrees in ECDO. That's the angle between the shafts. And in addition to the angle matching, at the end of each of those tunnels is a map of the stars, as they were under ECDO. So they're including stars that aren't visible from Egypt unless the Earth tips on its side.
Wait, so there are carvings? There are wall carvings of stars?
Yeah, so basically it's like a long tube, and then there's like a tablet kind of stone sitting at the end of the tube, and it has like etched into it a map of the night sky of the North Pole. And, each shaft
Well,
has a different map, or is the same map. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, as I said, but
does
like
that
there's a
mean
map at
that
the end of each pole, at the end of
but does
each
that
tube.
mean that they were the Earth was supposed so the Earth would have been in that position for them to know which star?
Uh,
At some point,
yeah.
they had to be in state 2 to be able to know which star, no?
Well, supposedly they were in state two before they built the pyramids,
Mm,
briefly. So 12,000 years ago, again, this is part of ECDO theory, is that it predicts that it for two of the cataclysms, 6,000 and 12,000 years ago. So, and the pyramids he proposes was built 6,000 years ago, older than what's official. And yeah, so what the I know ethical skeptic does not lay out this narrative, but I have tried to think through this myself. Like, what is like really like right after the cataclysm, they like added a second tunnel to like during those 100 years just to like look at the other star. I don't think so. What I think if you had to build a narrative about these star shafts, officially air shafts, that narrative would be that the cataclysm happened 12,000 years ago, caught people off guard, but some people survived. They kept records of it. They were a fairly advanced civilization, but not that advanced, doing some stonework and chemistry and watching the stars. They got, that was a horrible cataclysmic event that happened 12,000 years ago. And so they spent a big focus of their society was trying to figure out what caused that and how to prevent it and when it's going to happen again. And they know that the Earth tipped on its side and that the stars moved positions and stuff. So they it makes it seems plausible that if they had the technology to do so, they would build an observation station, one where they can try to detect signs that it might happen again. That way they can be prepared. And so they know from their ancient records from the 12,000 year ago cataclysm that the Earth tipped 104 degrees and it tipped into this direction. So they built a gigantic monitoring station that points at each of where each of the poles are going to be, and they had people, trained observers, looking down these shafts, making measurements, looking for how the Earth is wobbling, looking for signs that the wobble is getting bigger and that it's about to happen, so they can be prepared. ECDO proposes that the pyramids also monitored in multiple ways. It wasn't just monitoring the wobble of the Earth by looking up these shafts. It was monitoring the Earth's magnetic field using these big copper tubes. Copper tubes are part of the official narrative for the. There's these big copper cables that like run at like I think, are they also 104-degree angle, or maybe it's a 90-degree angle for, but like it's basically like antenna for measuring the Earth's magnetic field. So they're looking for signs that the Earth's wobbling too much with the star shafts. They're looking for signs that the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker, which is another sign that it's going to happen. And that's what those copper cables inside the pyramid are for, supposedly. And they're looking for unusual seismic activity, like the Earth vibrating and shifting from the pressure building up from the crust wanting to move. And that monitoring is done by a deep underground pool that they have. So they have they have like a pool of water or mercury. They're not sure which one. Mercury would be the best. And if the Earth shakes or vibrates in any way, it's like a seismology kind of thing where you can look at the ripples in the water or mercury and see and measure the strength of an earthquake around the world. And the structure of the pyramid happens to amplify um, earthquake type frequency vibrations and redirect them like off the tops and back into that pool. So it's a three. ECDO proposes that the Great Pyramid is a three-part monitoring station. One, vibrations of the Earth, and monitored through the mercury or water chamber down underground, and amplified by the reflections of the shape of the pyramid. Monitoring of the Earth's magnetic field getting weaker, as with the copper cables and monitoring of the star's locations with the star shaft air shaft tubes.
Well, that looks like it was solely for forecasting this event.
Yes, it looks like it's solely for forecasting the event, and then it does so in three ways, because I guess that's what they predicted would be the three ways of knowing it was going to
Knowing.
happen. It also would be a good place to because it's built to survive a cataclysmic event, even though it's at a really bad location for ECDO. Um, water washes over that, and it got under ECDO. Supposedly, the pyramid was underwater, so it's at a bad survival location, but it's in a good monitoring location. I think there's something to do with it's like location on the Earth is ideal for measuring the vibrations or something. I don't know. I'd have to look again, but it would be a good place to store a bunch of stuff underneath it. If there are structures found underneath the pyramids, that would be a way to verify ECDO. Would be like what's underneath the pyramids, because if stuff underneath the pyramid is related to the cataclysm, then that would be very, very strong evidence further in favor. And I
Mhm.
don't know. I can't really assess those recent findings. I know they got some. It looks like there's something there.
What would be where what would be the current territory in current sorry, what place is going to be in the North Pole in state 2?
Exactly. I think it's like well, if you go to the animate, can you go to the animation? You might be able to.
Wait, animation or your map? Oh, the
No, there's an animation. I'm not sure which link. I might have to send you a link again.
yeah, I
It's
lost.
in my thread. It's one of the earlier ones in the thread, I think. Yeah. Actually, I can just answer your question. I'll just watch the GIF myself and tell you.
Oh wait, like I have it. I found it. One sec.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I don't know. It's somewhere like Africa. I think goes there. It's rotating now.
Here, this one.
Okay, so South Africa is the North Pole on the ECDO shift, and then I can't quite tell what the South Pole is. I guess Hawaii. Yeah, it looks like somewhere near Hawaii. So Hawaii is South Pole, and South Africa is North Pole. Something like that, approximately.
Oh, okay. Okay,
But
okay.
it's very brief, so it's not like it has time to freeze or anything. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, kind of maybe to kill the animals. It's like 100 years or so. Is what he proposes.
So what do you think about the argument that there's DNA that survived in permafrost, so it couldn't have happened if the current North Pole ends up in the equator? How come there's DNA in the permafrost? What do you think about that?
I don't know what the DNA in permafrost
So
means.
apparently there's DNA that they found that was like million-year-old DNA. And so the question was like, how come it could have survived if the Earth moves to the equator?
Yeah, the rate at which the ice melts at the equator is it's very, very thick block of ice that can take hundreds of years to melt. I haven't researched into that. I know, in your interview with Space Weather Man, he or Space Weather News. What is his name?
Uh-huh.
Ben Davison, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had an interview with him, and he explained that there's still glaciers that haven't melted, like in the tropical areas. I don't know much about
Yeah.
that.
No, that's
Yeah,
true.
supposedly they melt really slow, and it's only in the ice caps only move to the equator under ECDO for like one lifetime.
Yeah. No, it's just I think like this one is about DNA, and turns out DNA is very sensitive, and it just, it doesn't survive unless there are like perfect condition for it, and there seems to be like 2 million-year-old like DNA found in um different like Arctic forest ecosystems, and so like in permafrost, And yeah, I think I will send you like also the table. Like I will maybe share. I found it like a table of all the DNA that survived, and so I think that's also a little bit confusing how come it could have survived. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that would be interesting because I mean, a lot of what I try to do is find stuff that like would disprove ECDO or like be evidence against it. But yeah, if you could find, but that would require like DNA to like we'd have to like know of some properties of this like this material should have been destroyed if it went from ice to the equator. But if the DNA is like deep in the ice, the fact that the ice exists still to this day means that ECDO didn't melt it. So I would think that it would still be preserved in the ice. If you're talking about like, oh, how did the DNA not get warm and fall apart, basically, it's because it's in the ice, and the ice did not spend enough time at the equator to melt.
yeah.
And
How about Earth's expansion theory that it's like opening up from the north? Have you looked into it?
I haven't heard about that. My I find ECDO interesting because it explains like anomalies everywhere. Like it explains anomalies on the seafloor north of Alaska. It explains just the salt on the ground. I find it fun, like looking into what it predicts, more so than understanding exactly how it happens. I only researched how it happens enough to see that it like seems plausible. Like Albert Einstein's into it, believes it's plausible. Euler would believe it's possible if you showed him the weight and balance of the Earth. So Soviet scientists in the 70s took it very seriously, as it's talked about in that Veritasium video. So I just verified that it's plausible for it to tip on its side because I thought that that was implausible in the first place, and I was like, well, dang it, I guess it is plausible. Well, in that case, okay, the oceans washed over the lands in this exact location on this exact year, whatever, and it was going this speed. And it's like that's such a precise prediction that I feel like I could research things to disprove it or prove it or find evidence for or against it. And that's most of my interest is just looking into evidence for or against it. So I don't
What
think
are
that
some
DNA is one of those things because if it's in the permafrost, then obviously it didn't melt, so it doesn't work either way.
and what are some other interesting anomalies that matches with ECDO?
Um, I'm not as aware of as many. I like to try to discover some of my own rather than looking at the existing ones. I had seen that there's some boulders that are moved into weird locations. That's something that they would predict. There's this other guy that investigates the Yunho BTC or something on Twitter. There's someone who's created like a repository of evidence that supports it, and I haven't looked into it that much. But the the I don't know. There's you can predict your own new evidence by just saying, okay, if the ocean washed over here, X would happen. All the trees would get swept away and deposited here. Oh, look, there's a bunch of coal there. I don't know. Like you can make predictions like that. As far as like supporting evidence outside of that, I'm not aware. I think there are some others. They're just not coming to mind. There's just the stuff that's already in the ECDO's article.
Mm-hmm.
And biodiversity is one. The I don't know. I already covered those. So yeah, there's a few that he has that were interesting, and I just like to find some more.
And so, given that you know now about what could happen, are you preparing or are you just what are your thoughts on preparation?
Well, as I said, I found that ECDO is plausible as shown by in multiple ways, and Einstein supported it. So, and as I continue to look at it, the evidence each time I continue to find new evidence that seems to suggest that it did happen, and that's exactly what caused the cataclysm. Um, you know, what's his name? Graham Hancock from Ancient Apocalypse. Like he basically agrees with Ethical Skeptic almost everything except for the cause of the cataclysm. He thinks that a bunch of comets impacted the Earth simultaneously from all the directions, and that's how the whole Earth got simultaneously destroyed. And that's also why the sea levels changed and there was so much flooding. ECDO proposes that that's not the comets, that it's this. So It seems plausible to me. I don't need to prepare because I'm already planning to. I've already, like, before I even knew about ECDO, I was planning to move to the mountains and get a nice off-grid place again. I used to live off-grid and really enjoyed it. So I want to do that anyway. And the place I was planning to move to happened to be Colorado, which is in the mountains. And I think it's not really salted on the map. That mountain range seems to have stopped the water last time. So I don't know. Um, I was already, like, before I even, like, ECDO has not affected my plans in any way, and I'm not completely sure that ECDO is real or that it's going to happen again. It's just interesting to me that it's both it's crazy that that's plausible and that serious scientists support it. That's wild to me. And then two, every time I try to, like, find evidence against like, I find evidence for it instead. And I find that pretty interesting. So it doesn't really change my plans at all. If I, like, lived in, like, a place that was going to get supposedly destroyed, like California, um, and I wasn't planning to move, maybe I would up my desire to, like, move to the mountains. But I already wanted to do that anyway. So yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for your time and breaking down this very difficult to understand theory.